number 12. We're moving into chapter 11, the last of our series of chapters 9, 10, and 11. I don't know whether I've told you or not, but we have passed the 600th broadcast, if you want to call it, or 600th lesson that we've put on the internet since COVID began back in 2020? Anyhow, we're going to look at Romans 11, verses 1 through 4 today. We've entitled it, Israel and God's Purpose. While looking at chapter 11, it's good to reflect on 2 points. First of all, Israel was intended to be an instrument for glorifying God in all the world, which implies also witnessing to the entire world as a group of people different than the world and separated unto his service. Israel, however, was not true to her mission, and God set her aside after she rejected her Messiah. So God had put up with her for 800 years, 1,000 years? No, more than 1,000 years, probably closer to 1,500 years or more in her wanderings away from him, generally into idolatry. Well, today's lesson is going to answer the following questions, at least we hope it will. And because the focus is on Israel, the Old Testament's going to come front and center. What are the questions? Well, I've got at least 3 of them here. How does Israel's being set aside work into God's plan? Now, he actively set them aside, so it was within his plans, obviously. How does it fit? What does it do? What does it accomplish? Secondly, God usually turns evil to good. What good comes from Israel's discipline? And the third question, will Israel ever be brought back to the center of God's activity? There are those who tell you that the church has replaced Israel. Temporarily maybe, but not permanently. It's important to keep in mind that chapter 11 focuses on corporate matters with respect to Israel, not on the salvation of individual Jews. Now, Paul is going to get there and refer to these things in a bit, but right now it is corporate Israel that's being discussed. So here at the start, Paul wants to put the concern that the Jews will have in Rome. He's writing to, of course, a congregation that will include both Jews and Gentiles. So he wants to put their concern to bed. He doesn't want them believing that Israel's done, period. No. So let's read the first 4 verses and then we'll talk about them. I say then, and this is Paul talking, God has not rejected his people Israel, has he? May it never be. We're going to have to talk about that verse in a minute, because it sounds like it's just contradicting what I have just said a minute ago. For I too, here's Paul again, I too am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. That means he foreknew, he knows them before they existed, of course. He chose them before they existed for a special relationship with him. So that's what we mean by foreknew. He knew ahead of time, and he chose ahead of time. Or do you not know what the scripture says in the passage about Elijah, how he pleads with God against Israel? And this is quoting from, I think, 2 Kings, either 1st or 2 Kings. He says, Lord, and this is Elijah commiserating, if you please, Lord, they have killed thy prophets. They have torn down thine altars. He's talking about Ahab and Jezebel in the northern kingdom, of course. And I alone am left. He said, I'm the only guy on your side, Lord, that's left. The only prophet that is left. And they are seeking my life. They're trying to take care of me. And again, this is out of 2 Kings 18, chapter 18. But, verse 4, what is the divine response to him? Paul asks. Well, here Paul gives God's answer to Elijah. I, that's Yahweh, have kept for myself 7,000 men, and this is men in the northern kingdom, who have not bowed the knee to Baal. He said, I've got 7,000 guys on my side that I have chosen, I have kept safe, and they have not worshipped Baal. They have remained true to worship for me, or to me. So, what's the theme of chapter 11 then? It's going to be that God has not permanently rejected his nation Israel. He's still concerned with her and will be faithful to every single promise he has made on her behalf. His rejection of Israel is neither total nor permanent. So, let me ask you a couple more questions. From verse 1, who are his chosen people? And of course, you all know that is the nation Israel. Now, when you want to come up to today, it will revert to all those who have accepted Christ. Also, from verse 1, what is meant by the word reject? And when Paul used the word reject here, he meant permanently setting aside. So he's essentially saying, has God permanently rejected or set aside Israel? And the answer, he says, is of course not. Absolutely not. How absurd. In support of Paul's answer that God did not permanently reject the nation Israel, he offers 4 arguments as evidence. The first one we call Exhibit A, Paul himself. Paul said in verse 1, look at me. I'm a Jewish Christian, a member of the remnant. I don't know why I want to put an extra A in there. It's not remnant, it's remnant. R-E-M-N-A-N-T. The stumbling of many Jews doesn't imply the rejection of all Jews. And of course, we're referring to the term about stumbling stone. Paul claimed that his salvation is proof that God still cares for Jews individually, one-on-one. And while God could have sent a Gentile Christian, he chose a Jew to declare salvation by faith to the Gentiles. Now, Peter had delivered the same message, only he didn't know it was the same message. He just said it happened that way. Salvation is of the Jews. Paul is not backing away from that notion. Exhibit B, the second exhibit. God's foreknowledge and his eternal plan. In verse 2a, Paul reminded us that God foreknew the nation Israel. When? Before the foundation of the world. Israel was God's sovereign choice, not based on any merit within the nation itself. Israel had done nothing to gain God's favor. God established a relationship with the nation he was yet to create. Since Yahweh established the relationship without any consideration of merit, he then has no reason to break that relationship because of demerit. And there was plenty of demerit to go around in Israel. God didn't choose Israel because of merit. He will not reject her permanently because of demerit. Same thing with believers. Verse 2 weaves Paul's own exposition with the Old Testament, extolling God's righteous judgment of the wicked and his protection for Israel. Let me go back to 1 Samuel 12. And I'm going to look at verse 21 and 22 in 1 Samuel 12. And you must not turn aside, for then you would go after futile things. That's a description of idols. They're futile things, which cannot profit or deliver, because they are futile. For the Lord will not abandon his people on account of his great name. So if God doesn't abandon Israel permanently, it's because of his own nature. Because Yahweh has been pleased to make you a people for himself. So it says God didn't choose you because of anything in you. He did it before the foundation of the world, and he's not going to reject you because he has made you his own. His argument, Paul's argument, depends squarely on the truth of Scripture. 1,000 years earlier, God had said he would not reject his people permanently. This is 1,000 years at least before Paul. God is faithful. God cannot lie. Therefore, Yahweh did not and has not rejected Israel permanently. Don't forget that Paul has already spoken to this issue in Romans chapter 3 a couple times, in verses 3 and 4, and then again in chapter 9, verse 6. Paul likely had other scriptural passages in mind, such as Jeremiah 31, 35 to 37, and something from Amos. Let's look at Amos chapter 3, the first 2 verses. Hear this word which the Lord Yahweh has spoken against you, sons of Israel. Now, in this case, the sons of Israel means the sons of Jacob, but Amos is speaking specifically to the northern kingdom. Against the entire family which he brought up from the land of Egypt. You only have I chosen among all of the families of the earth. Therefore, and this sounds like he's ready to make some kind of appeasement. Not so. Therefore, because I've chosen you from all the families of the earth to be my special ownership, my special people, therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities. So he's telling the northern kingdom, because I chose you, because I love you, because I have not nor will not reject you permanently, I'm going to punish you, I'm going to discipline you. Well, let's move to number 3, Exhibit C. The remnant of Israel. Not satisfied to speak abstractly, Paul gave the reader an historical example of God's preservation for a remnant from the Jews, meaning out of the entire nation he has some people separated as his own special people within his own special nation. I'm going to look at 1 Kings chapter 19. I got, about 5 verses I want to look at. First one is verse 10. And this is determined during a time of major apostasy under Ahab and Jezebel, when Jezebel had vowed to kill Elijah. He replied, and this is to the Lord who had just inquired why, this is to Ahab who had just inquired why Elijah was here. And this is Elijah said, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, torn down thine altars. They took your covenant, Lord, and they've walked away from it. They've got their own temples in Bethel. They got your own temple up in Dan with the golden calves in it. And they tore down all of your altars, Lord, and they killed your prophets with the sword. How many, I do not have a clue. And I alone am left. This is Elijah talking again. And they seek my life to take it away. And it came about, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle. I assume this was either because of the storm that was going on, or that he was hiding his face of shame for feeling that he was about to be wiped out. He was scared. And he went out and he stood in the entrance of the cave. And behold, a voice came to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? So this is Yahweh speaking to him. Then Elijah said, I've been very zealous for Yahweh, the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, torn down thy altars, and killed thy prophets with the sword. And I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. But now Yahweh responds. And the Lord said to him, Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, the northern kingdom, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So he said, these guys, I got 7,000 guys in the northern kingdom, my special guys, my remnant, that I have protected and kept because they have not worshipped Baal. Where were the 7,000 that God had said he had? We don't know. Their whereabouts were certainly not known by Elijah either, because he didn't know there were 7,000. He thought he was the only one left. He thought the remnant consisted of one, him. Well, let's go back to Romans 11 and talk about how verse 4 shows God's sovereignty. How does it? Well, essentially because of the remnant. Whatever its size, it's chosen by grace through the sovereign will of God. God essentially made that clear. He said, I have my 7,000. I've kept them. They did not worship Baal. He had a remnant of 7,000 men left in the northern kingdom. How many women and children were there? We don't know that either. But from the standpoint of speaking to Elijah, he's probably talking about people who qualify as prophets. A large number? 7,000 seems like a pretty good-sized crowd, but it's not really very large. It's estimated, for example, there were between 1.5 and 3 million Hebrews that came out of the Exodus. 400 to 600 years later, there would have been millions more. If there were even 7 million, the 7,000 would amount to only 1/10 of 1% of the people. So the 7,000 sounds like a ton. God just said, I have a remnant. I have kept them. I have persuaded or preserved them. 7,000 of them, not very many in terms of how many there could have been saved, but a goodly number nonetheless. Well, let's go to number 4, Exhibit D. God's discipline of Israel is for constructive purposes. God is not destroying the northern kingdom just to destroy it or just to punish them. He has a constructive purpose for the end game. He had disciplined Israel. By nature, discipline is always temporary, and it's always for the eventual benefit of the one being disciplined. So when you're being disciplined, don't get thinking God's given up on you. It indicates God still is with you, still loves you, and still has something for you. But you have to turn from him, or back to him rather, because you obviously in some respect have turned from him. I'm thinking of Jonah, for example. God said, I want you to go to Nineveh and preach. Tell them about all of their evil. Jonah says, I don't think so. So it takes off. God says, wait a minute, guy. I got a little plan to bring you back to myself. It's not a pretty plan, but it'll bring you back so that you will do what my plan calls for you to do. Well, I hope you've noticed that how the Old Testament and the New Testament do fit together. Paul's using the Old Testament to support what he is saying. They do indeed form one unified revelation of God. The New Testament is not to be preferred over the Old. They are both God's Word. I hope you're encouraged to examine the Old Testament, and I hope that you see it in a new light as a result of our study here in Romans. Paul makes very heavy use of the Old Testament. Paul has made at least 4 points to this in these chapters. The hardening of Israel is the result of disobedience. They're going to idolatry predominantly. And so this was true especially of the northern kingdom, who made it blatant statement that they were not under the covenant anymore, at least because they said we're walking away from temple worship at Jerusalem. God keeps, this is the second point, God keeps a remnant of saved Jews. There are always Jews available. The nation is never without Jews who are faithful to God. God is using Israel's disobedience to bring salvation to the Gentile world. So Israel didn't itself spread news of God widely. So God says, all right, in your disobedience, I will make sure that your discipline brings about that widespread advertisement of God's plan. God is using the salvation of Gentiles, however, to move ethnic Israel back to himself. How? We're going to see that later. He said he hopes that what is happening with Gentiles and Gentiles coming to salvation, finding a right standing with God that they couldn't find, that I just saw about a dozen quail go out the back window, that God is going to make Israel jealous of the Gentiles receiving right standing with God. And that will in turn to Israel's total restoration in the last days. Here's a related application. And some we don't typically message or say as a message, but it's this: God does some of his best work through a small remnant. So the remnant isn't like leftovers. It is a well-chosen, well-prepared group to do God's will, ready to do God's will. In the next passages, Paul is going to move from an examination of Israel's past, which he did in chapter 9, to her present, which he did in chapter 10, to her future as we finish chapter 11. Take a couple more sessions, but then we will finish and look at Israel's prescribed future. Best advice? Always keep looking forward to Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. See you then, and we'll get on with